Welcome back, everybody, to the second ever Progress Pondcast. We changed our name because we discovered there were a lot of people who had already taken Progress Podcast. So we're going to be Progress Pondcast from now on. And that's fine because my blog is www.progresspond.com.
Anyway, literally, there were literally about when I was setting up the podcast, Marty, and we got it first launched. It was almost impossible for me to find it because I was looking and looking and looking, and it was like Progress this, Progress Podcast this, Progress Podcast that, and I just had this immediate kind of oh shit moment.
Yeah, well, we're a couple of knuckleheads who didn't do our research, so from now on, we're going to be the Progress Pondcast. And Brendan, last week we were talking about your trip to Nashville, but when you told me what you wanted to talk about this week, I got a little bit excited and a little bit nostalgic.
We had ourselves a visit from an old friend, I guess, this past week.
Guess.
Doodly, 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 doodly. Make the time machine sounds. Doodly, doodly, back in time, back in time, back in time with our old pal, Joe Klein.
Yeah. Or as we used to call him, Joe Klein.
Joe Klein. He hated that.
Yeah. JOKELINE. Yeah.
Well, before I start bitching about him, tell me, get us up to speed with old Joe, man. Get us up to speed.
Well, it's funny because you told me you want to talk about Joe Klein. So I knew I used to write about him a lot. And I went and looked in my Progress Pond archives, and it's just filled with, Joe Klein is a wanker, Joe Klein wanks, Joe Klein wanks again, Joe Klein in the art of the wank.
He got really mad about some of those too. I think he responded to you directly at least once.
I don't know. It's possible. He responded to a lot of people because we would get his goat. He was easy to get his goat, and he paid attention. He read everything people wrote about him.
Well, the dude thought he was like, the guy had like this head, this ego that like was way, way, way more than he should have had. I mean, he was a punching bag for a reason. Let's put it that way.
Really definitely. Definitely. So he's back in the, I guess he's back in the news now because he wrote this stupid Washington Post article. But, before we get to that, we got to, for the audience who may not know this history with Joe Klein, he's a guy who got his start with Rolling Stone back in the Hunter S. Thompson era in the 1970s.
So he should be cool, but he's not.
Yeah. But then, he was traumatized by, I guess at first, it was watching George McGovern get absolutely slaughtered,
demolished.
Demolished.
And then like a wrecking ball.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course Jimmy Carter got demolished and Walter Mondale got demolished, and he and a whole bunch of liberals from his generation were traumatized by all of this, and by the late 80s, early 90s, they were blaming the anti-war left and the whole, what was that thing from the McGovern thing, or amnesty, acid, and abortion, I think it was. But he was convinced that the far left was to blame for the ascendancy of the right.
Well, the far left is to blame for fucking everything, though, right?
Yeah.
That's been the line. That is, look, man, I'll betray my age. I'm going to be 53 years old in just a couple of months, and I'll tell you what, basically my entire adult life and a lot of my teenage years too was all the left, the horrible left. They're going to do everything. It's almost as if people like Joe Klein and people of that generation internalize the idea that the left is always wrong. Even though they used to be proponents of the left is always right. It's like no real firmly held beliefs. So yeah, it's like a knee-jerk reaction for the dude. Total knee-jerk reaction.
I call it battered wife syndrome. It's like he's afraid that if you do anything, you'll just get hit.
Well, I'm going to tangent for a minute because that's a very real thing. I used to work for a domestic violence agency, and that's a real mentality. That's a real mentality that victims have.
You'll get mad.
He'll get mad. Don't make the big daddy Republicans mad. Listen to me, Joe Klein.
And then they convince themselves that it's their fault.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made the ogre, the bully mad. So that's kind of Klein's shtick,
Yep.
And that's where he got himself in the crosshairs of the blogosphere back in the day. But even before that, he became a household name when he wrote that book, Primary Colors.
Yep. That's what he swore up and down. He didn't write it. Nope. All these people were like, "Did you write it?" I think you found out that there was some guy at Vassar, some professor at Vassar that analyzed it, and basically he just lied. He lied, and then when he got caught lying, nothing happened. Like nothing. He just kept nothing went on.
Yeah. Well, and to refresh the listeners, he wrote this book, Primary Colors, that came out in 1996, but it was about the 1992 Clinton campaign. Yeah. And he had, I guess, some decent access to the campaign. And he wrote this kind of savage critique of Clinton and in a book form. Yep. And it was a good seller. I mean, it sold a lot of books, but it was published anonymously. And so people were really curious about who wrote this book. And you're right. There was some professor up at Vassar who did this analysis. And this is before they had the sophisticated computers to detect plagiarism and things that they have today. So I don't know what his methodology was, but he determined that the likely author of Primary Colors was Joe Klein. And so he started getting asked about that, and he denied it up and down, up and down. At one point, he had an interview with the Washington Post, and they asked him, "Are you the author of Primary Colors?" And he said no. And then they said, "Would you put your journalistic integrity on the line by denying it?" And he said,
did.
Yeah, he said, "Yes, I put my journalistic integrity on the line. I did not write Primary Colors." And then I don't know how much later, but not long after that, he decided he couldn't deny it anymore. He came clean. And I mean, so that kind of shot his journalistic credibility by his own,
Yeah, he shot himself in the foot.
Yeah.
He took his journalistic credit. He put his journalistic credibility in front of a wall, handed it a cigarette, and just wiped it out with a freaking firing squad of his own lies.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. So that's kind of what happened there. And then, so then that was, I guess the book was published 96 and the controversy was probably in that period, 97 maybe. But then 2003 comes along, the Iraq War comes along.
Everything's going to shit.
The blogosphere comes into existence around what, 2002 maybe?
Yes. Well, that's a little before my time. I didn't really start blogging until about 2003, 2004.
Yeah. That's about that period. Time. Yeah, in that period. And so I mean, I remember one of the big things we had with him in the blogosphere was this whole thing that happened. I guess this was all the way up in 2007. And by that time, the Iraq War had completely become a fiasco.
Americans were like the dog sitting in the room, the cartoon where the dog sitting in the room where it's on fire. The dog is drinking a cup of coffee and just says, "This is fine."
Yeah, but it wasn't fine.
It was. That's why I started blogging. It wasn't fine. Stop telling me it's fine.
Yeah. So 2007, now you're heating up for the 2008 presidential.
Yep.
And Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are, by that time they're the front runners. I guess John Edwards is in there too.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And
before he got touched up on the lady.
Yeah. I don't think he was in the Senate anymore. I'm not sure. But anyway, Hillary and Obama were not going to vote for this supplemental funding bill for Iraq. And the main reason they weren't going to vote for the funding was because they were getting a lot of pressure from people like you and me.
Yep.
In the blogosphere and on the left, saying, don't give more money, don't give tens of millions of more dollars to Bush to fight this war in Iraq until he tells us how he's getting out.
Yep. And as I remember it, this was when back when all of the big newspapers were basically in the tank for the Iraq War. I remember having emails I remember actually emailing Fred Hyatt back when he responded to his emails, asking him if he'd want his kids to sign up, and he admitted no. I wish I'd saved that email. But yeah,
he was in charge of the Washington Post editorial board back then.
Yep. And Joe there was just was doing his whole, don't make the Republican daddy mad shtick. Don't make the Republican daddy mad shtick. And he was all over Obama and Clinton for that. He thought it was the worst thing in the world that they were doing, that they were going to not vote for the supplemental for the glorious adventure in Iraq.
And I guess his point was, this is going to be the 1970s all over again. And you're going to get a reputation for being soft on terrorism, and the American people are going to punish you for it. So, I mean, at least in theory, he was trying to do the right thing for the wrong reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, he was kind of obsessed on this whole thing. And he decided what he needed was a good counterexample, a good Democrat that was handling this supplemental voting bill in the right way.
The smart way,
right? So he went to she was a congresswoman from California, Jane Harman.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I remember her.
Yeah. She was the chairwoman of the House Intelligence Committee at the time.
Yep.
And she was a big fan of, well, no, I won't say she was a big fan, but she wouldn't do anything about the warrantless wiretapping.
That a lot of people were mad about. I was pissed about that. I was making, you can imagine the phone calls I was making about that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, for sure. And so she was already kind of like in the crosshairs of the liberal blogosphere anyway. But he went to talk to her, and he gave all his concerns, about how this was going to look, and it was bad for the Democratic frontrunners to be soft on terrorism. Yeah.
Soft on terror.
Yeah. And so Jane Harman agreed. She was like, yeah, that's a bad look. For sure. I'm going to vote for the supplemental funding. And, you're super intelligent and gifted, Joe Klein, So he was very happy. Klein was very happy. And he wrote up this column for probably, I think it was Time.
I think it was Time.
He wrote up this column and he made all these points that we're talking about. But a funny thing happened, which was when the time came to vote, Jane Harman voted the same way as Clinton and Obama.
Yeah, she was getting hit with a primary from the left, though, and she didn't want to lose her job. She's not an idiot. Joe Klein's not running for anything.
Yeah.
Joe Klein's probably not even her constituent. What does she care what Joe Klein thinks? Right. But then he published his stupid article anyway, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't have mattered except for he didn't check to see who voted how. So he went ahead and he published the article like as if she had voted for the money. And of course, okay, I mean, that's a pretty big mistake to put in print.
Well, he got all mad.
He got mocked, man.
Oh my God, I remember it. He was like he was on, I think Twitter existed. Yes, Twitter did exist then, didn't it?
I don't know. It was before I signed up for it.
All I know is that I remember reading these articles where Joe was like just lashing out at the bloggers. He was this one, that one.
Yeah, it was an honest mistake, man.
Yeah,
like cut me a break. You're the people who are intolerant. I think we had a quote somewhere about he had on the liberal blogosphere, like that we're full of.
Is it the one where he says he So he was a veteran reporter by that time, right? He's got his roots in Rolling Stone back when Rolling Stone was cool. He's at the Time magazine, the Post, and he decided he was going to try blogging too because blogging is the new thing. And we're going to all blog now, blah blah. Yeah. And and I'm going to jump back he calls he retired from blogging because it was. Because it turned out he didn't like and I'm quoting here, fierce, bullying, often witless tone of intolerance that has taken over the left-wing sector of the blogosphere. And then he said that
Wait, what was it? Wait, hold on a second. Witless what?
The fierce, bullying, often witless tone of intolerance that has taken over the left-wing sector of the blogosphere.
Which is really just us laughing at him for
us laughing at him. Yeah. And he went even further. He accused anti-war Democrats of wanting to reenact Robespierre's reign of terror.
Oh,
now let me just jump on this for a second, because it's like, that is such a ridiculous, and especially considering the time. You got to remember that there was no Twitter then, there was no social media, there was no Facebook. The closest thing you had was like blogs and bulletin boards and stuff like that. Nobody was listening to bloggers. Our point of view was not showing up in the newspapers, except for something that the newspapers could point and laugh at. This is when we used to talk a lot about gatekeepers to the media and how certain points of view were kept out. If anyone was bullying, witlessly intolerant, it was the exact kind of journalistic institutions that Joe Klein worked for.
Oh yeah.
So him calling it basically his nonsense about bullying and that's what that boils down to. It was one of my mother's favorite quotes. And the quote goes like this: "Mommy, he hit me back." That's Joe Klein right there. That's all he was doing after that was his response to criticism.
He had a famously thin skin.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But now to bring it up to date, you know, the new thing is, I guess, that Hunter Biden is like the Iraq war. Like Hunter Biden, the Iraq war was going to kill us if we didn't support it. Now it's like Hunter Biden's going to kill us if we don't, I don't know, set him on fire and launch him into space or something. I don't know. I know you went through this article. God bless you, because you need a hazmat suit.
Yeah, Joe Klein's back, everybody, and he hasn't changed a bit.
yeah, still afraid of getting hit by the rain.
And what's so funny is about the Hunter Biden thing, before we jump into this, is it's like, who the fuck is Hunter Biden? Like these investigations that I've seen haven't gone anywhere. They keep getting told it's no, they're there. And to me, it's like, and I want to revisit that thing about media gatekeepers, because it's not the same environment it was back in the early 2000s. Now there's all sorts of different. If the media said this thing was an issue, that thing was an issue, there wasn't that much way to push back effectively.
Right.
And to show that, the Republicans would say, this is an issue, that's an issue. The media would run with it, because the media always runs with whatever outrage the Republicans say. And there was no real pushback. But what we've got now, to me at least, with this Hunter Biden thing, is this is just one of many things the Republicans are trying to throw at the wall to see if it sticks. Yeah. It's one of the reasons that it's very difficult for me to read things like, to listen to NPR anymore, or read a lot of, I'm not going to call it mainstream media because I don't want to sound like Sarah Palin. Why it's very difficult for me to take a lot of, legitimate reporting necessarily at its face value, because it seems so many times reporters are chasing after whatever the Republicans think are going to stick, and they treat it seriously, like it's going to stick. And so for me, Hunter Biden is just one more. It's a strand of spaghetti thrown at the wall, and it's not a big thing, and it's embarrassing to see, so-called serious journalists chase after it as if it's real.
Here's the thing I want to talk about, because we're going to get into this article in a minute, but I want to talk about what actually happened to Joe Biden and his family and Hunter Biden.
Yeah, because it's worth mentioning, man. It's absolutely worth mentioning.
Yeah. So, let me just.
Just so we have some because we're about to go into Joe Klein using Hunter Biden to shit on Joe Biden, and it's important to know exactly. Yeah. Go on. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah. So Hunter Biden he's about our age. He was born in February 1970.
All right.
So I guess he's I don't know what that is, like 5 months younger than me, a little bit older than you,
A couple
right?
months older than me.
Yeah. Okay. So he's from our generation. And so what happens here? So 1972, Joe Biden becomes I think he was the youngest person ever elected to the U.S. Senate from Delaware.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's exciting. He's got a wife. He's got 3 kids, and now he's headed to Washington, D.C. And he's down in D.C. now. It's December 18th. So a little bit after the election. He hasn't yet been sworn in, but he's down there for some orientation, so he can learn to become a U.S. senator, get off on the right foot.
Yeah.
And his family's back in Delaware. The wife takes the 3 kids out to buy a Christmas tree. So this is a week before Christmas.
Yeah.
And she pulls out in the station wagon, and she doesn't see a tractor trailer come in. And it smashes into the door of the car, the driver's side door.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And it sends this thing, according to the reports I've read, it sends the car like 150 feet down the road through a row of evergreen trees, smashes through some road sign, and then it comes to rest against another tree.
That's just insane.
Yeah. So his wife and his little baby, Amy, they're killed instantly. I mean, at least they were dead on arrival at the hospital.
Yep.
Okay. And his 2 boys who were in the back, the older boy, Bo, he had all kinds of broken bones, and he was in a full body cast for, I guess, weeks and weeks, months.
Yep.
Hunter, he had a traumatic brain injury. Okay. So he was, how old is he then? He's not quite 3 years old.
He's not quite. Can I interject for a minute?
Yeah.
When I was very young, I want to say, older than probably about 6 years old, 7 years old. I was friends, growing up, I was friends with these twin brothers, Jimmy and Joey, who lived up the street from me.
Yeah.
And we all had our big wheels. I lived on a semi-busy street, but the Jimmy and Joey lived on a side street. It was a 2-way street, but it was a small side street, just a block long. That's it. And we would cross the street. It's the 70s, parents, not like today. It's like, my mom was like, make sure you're home when the street lights come on, that kind of stuff. And
we hadn't even imagined a bike helmet yet.
Yeah, there were no bike helmets. We didn't have bikes. We had big wheels. So we were riding our big wheels across the street to visit there were a bunch of kids on both sides of the street, family neighborhood. And we were riding our big wheels across the street, and some dude just came screaming up the street in a big old 1970s car, the kind, Oldsmobile, something like that. And my friend Joey got hit by a car, and he was in the hospital. And, these were identical twins, but after that accident, you could very definitely tell the difference between Jimmy and Joey. You could absolutely tell the difference, because Joey had a traumatic head injury and Jimmy had not. And Joey was slower. He graduated on time with the rest of us. He was really good at football. But one of the reasons he was good at football was because he was really, really, really aggressive. And part of that, a lot of people now would probably tie to what had happened to him from the traumatic head injury and stuff like that. He was very different, though. But anyway, continue. Sorry to interrupt.
But I think that probably is kind of a parallel of the Biden family, because Bo, the older brother, he was busted up, but he didn't have the brain injury, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so he goes on, he was the Attorney General of Delaware.
Yep.
He was an officer in the army. He served in Iraq.
Yep.
A lot of people thought that he might one day be president.
Yeah, I remember that.
He definitely was the apple of Joe's eye, and I should mention here that he later died of a brain tumor, which is another tragedy in Joe Biden's life.
Absolutely.
But he was this high functioning kid. And I think for Hunter, it was already hard enough. I think for anybody, it's already hard enough. Like, your father's a U.S. senator, or your father's a vice president or something. Like, how are you going to how are you going to match that?
Right.
But Bo was kind of doing it, Bo was on that path of matching his father, and Hunter just, he couldn't do that. He couldn't pull that off. And so also, then his brother dies.
Yeah.
Right. And he goes into a downward spiral, and he starts abusing drugs, and suffering from alcoholism and stuff. And there's two things about this. The first thing is, my God, Joe Biden has suffered so much in his personal life.
Yep.
God, how can you go after the guy's kid?
I know.
How can you not have compassion? But secondly, for Hunter, I know that he's made a lot of poor decisions.
Sure has.
And I think people should have some compassion for him and let this kid who's trying to, he's, as far as I know, he's clean now.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. And, I'm someone who's in recovery. I know, you make mistakes when you're using, and that's part of why you got to go around and ask people for forgiveness and stuff. Right.
Yep.
I mean, you got to give people some space and let them get past all the stuff that they've done and rebuild their lives. So I just want to say that's kind of the perspective that I come into this from, which is I'm going to be real sensitive if you go after Joe Biden's kids just because of what he's been through.
Yep.
And if you go after a guy like Hunter, it's like, man, have some mercy.
For real.
Have some mercy on this kid. And that's not to say that there aren't some things you might look at as far as, did he trade on his relationship with his father? Did his father do anything unethical and stuff? I'm not saying every single thing is off limits, but I am saying like this single-minded focus on Hunter Biden, which so far they found nothing on Joe.
They're basically what they're doing is they're using Hunter Biden as a punching bag, as a proxy for punching at Joe Biden, because every time they punch at Biden, they miss.
Yeah. And it's like, whataboutism, right?
Yeah.
Like, Trump did this. Well, what about Hunter?
Yeah, I know. What about Hunter?
All right. So having said all that, like, let's take a look at this shitty article.
Yeah, let's take a look at this shitty article. So yeah, the Washington Post dug up old frickin' Joe Klein. They sent Igor to the graveyard, dug him up, and it as we were discussing we're talking about compassion, and that is exactly the topic of Joe Klein's column, how Joe Biden's compassion for his son blew up in his face. And this is all about the Republican obsession with Hunter Biden that we're talking about. With a couple of weeks ago, Marjorie Taylor Greene, they were having a congressional hearing. She throws up nude pictures of Hunter Biden, again, like I was saying, to punch at Joe Biden, punch Joe Biden's kids because I can't punch Joe Biden myself. And, like I said, I went through this editorial. I'm going to go through some of the highlights, or I guess lowlights, of this piece of shit.
Yeah.
And so it starts off, and again, this was published earlier this week in the Washington Post. I'll post a link in our comments or whatever at the website. As I said, the title is how Joe Biden's compassion for his son blew up in his face. Well, first of all, how is this blown up in his face? Because I don't see Joe Biden's ratings dropping as a result of Hunter Biden. His ratings aren't exactly the highest in the world, but it doesn't really seem to be tied to Hunter Biden's problems. And he starts off with Hunter Biden has gone from being an embarrassment to a real problem for his father, and adds that in the history of squalid presidential siblings and spawn, Biden has lapped the field. So first of all, again,
wait, let me say. So he's saying that Biden has the worst family in the history of presidents. Is that what he's saying?
Yep, he sure does. And his comparisons, by the way, are Billy Carter, whose crime was whose big crime was trying to make money off Jimmy's name by releasing a beer named for himself, Billy Beer.
Yeah.
And the other big pariah is Roger Clinton, who I can't even remember what Roger Clinton looks like, but I guess he was an embarrassment too.
I guess again, what was he doing, cocaine or something? I don't remember.
It's something like that. But like for real, I mean, like, number one, did either of those people derail their presidential siblings' careers? No. I mean, Carter was a failed president, but there were other reasons for that, and none of them had anything to do with Billy. And today, Carter is admired as globally, internationally as a humanitarian. I mean, they talk about him like he's Gandhi. And as for Bill Clinton, whatever his issues, went on to win another term. And whatever people may think of him now, and I know that some people don't like him that much, some people have mixed feelings, some people still think the guy's great. You cannot deny that Bill Clinton is an elder statesman of the Democratic Party. So those comparisons, those two examples that Klein holds up, are both idiotic and a million years old, like Joe Klein, to begin with. But then, like in recent history, I mean, come on, give me a break, dude. You're saying that Hunter Biden is worse than Donald Trump Jr., who like literally has been on Fox News tweaking out of his mind on cocaine, like his eyes googling around. He can't stop talking.
He and his girlfriend.
The best is yet to come. I mean, my God, what was she on? And that's worse than freaking Jared and Ivanka, who making friends with Mohammed bin Salman there, whatever his goddamn name is, the guy that had the journalist dismembered. Yeah. I mean, come on, that's more. Hunter Biden is more squalid than that. I mean, my God, I can think of celebrities that are way worse than freaking Hunter Biden.
And the two boys, Eric and Donald Jr., they're not even allowed to do charities in New York.
I know. Yeah. They're banned from running charities. No one's done that to Hunter Biden. So come on,
right?
It's ridiculous. Then he says, Joe Klein comes in with the Trump offspring and in-laws use their orange proximity to help score deals with the Saudis and China, but they did it with their clothes on and their noses clean. First of all, if the bar for corruption is taking off your clothes, I don't know what dimension Joe Klein is living in, because that is ridiculous. In my world, doing business with our foes, enemies, frenemies, I'm not sure what you want to call them, but doing backroom deals with those people is a hell of a lot more. That's a hell of a lot more moral turpitude than sending a dick pic to someone. And that nose is clean. Well, we've already demolished that. We don't even talk about that with Don Jr. and his issues. All right. So the one thing I want to get back to, by the way, and I realize I just trashed the Trump kids all over the place. They deserve to be trashed all over the place. And I'm going to get a bit more to this article in a minute. But, you notice one thing here that Klein, where we were discussing compassion for people like Hunter Biden previously, for kids and adults like Hunter Biden, Joe Klein explicitly in his headline and all the way through this rejects any idea of compassion. And he's still got this battered wife syndrome going on. It's not like he, in fact, repeatedly through the article, he says that he doesn't believe any of these allegations, but yet he's throwing them up there in the most lurid and public way possible and basically just piling on with the Republicans. He expresses no compassion for Hunter Biden's problems. All he does is pile on and do the exact same thing that the Republicans are doing, and kind of like almost like looking at Joe Biden being like, see, this is what happens. This is what happens. It's his battered wife syndrome going on again.
He starts the thing out by making like pretty much all the same points that we made,
Yeah, he totally does.
He talks about the accident. He talks about how he had this brother that was more accomplished.
Yep.
He sounds like he's going to write a piece that understands the difficulties that Hunter's been through, but then like right off the bat, he steers away from it.
And then he compares him unfavorably to the Trump kids, unfavorably to Don Jr. and Eric.
Yeah.
At some point in the article, he refers to he refers to Hunter Biden as an open wound and says he suffers from Cain syndrome, being the lesser son. I'm going to read this because I have to. Being the lesser son for whom a family tragedy curdled into a lifetime of dependency and depravity. Yeah. Is that what Cain syndrome is? Because I thought Cain syndrome was when you murder your brother and then you're punished by God for committing a murder. That's what Cain syndrome is. I know because I've read the Bible. And he just posts all the, like you said, he posts all this lurid stuff about the drugs and guns, naked pictures, this and that. But then he closes with, until it's proved otherwise, I will find it extremely hard to believe the president was a party to his son's nefarious schemes.
Yeah,
so
it's like
that's like me just basically calling your family a piece of shit over and over again. It's like me calling your kid a piece of shit, a piece of shit, a piece of shit. Oh, but you're but you're not involved. And what? And then he accuses Joe Biden of enabling his son because he keeps his family close to him. He keeps his family close to him. He winds up, Klein starts, he goes off on Joe Biden for being empathic, as if that's something wrong. And he basically boils down to over and over and over again that everything Hunter Biden is alleged to have done, remember, by people he says he doesn't believe, I don't believe any of it's true, but everything Hunter Biden has done is ultimately Joe Biden's fault because Joe Biden embraces his troubled son. That's what Klein boils down to, is everything Hunter did, and I don't believe it, is Joe Biden's fault. And by the way, Joe Biden should have turned his back on his son for the sake of politics, because that's what empathic people do. Right?
Yeah. So here, Klein says that the sin of Joe Biden is that he enabled his son.
How is that enabling your son? How is that? I have friends who have kids with substance abuse problems and addiction problems and all sorts of stuff. I mean, what are they supposed? I mean, for real, dude. I live over on Kensington Avenue in Philadelphia. I live one block up from the heroin apocalypse that this city is going through. My street is filled with people who have been abandoned. It is filled with people who have been abandoned. Joe Klein wants Joe Biden to abandon his son. He wants Hunter Biden to what? Be on the streets, living in a cardboard box? Is that what he wants?
It's also like anybody who's had a child or a husband or a wife or someone they care about who's in the depths of some kind of addiction. They know how difficult it is to, have any influence at all. You can try this, you can try that, and until they make a decision to do something, there's not a lot you can do, So I guess he wanted him to cut Hunter Biden like out of his life or something. But the truth is, I read this when they were talking about this accusation they're making that Joe Biden was somehow involved in helping Hunter land business deals. But what came out of that was that every day that Joe Biden was vice president, he called Hunter Biden.
Yep.
Like apparently every day.
Yeah. Because he cares about his kid, wants to make sure he's doing okay.
Yeah. Among his 3 kids he had with his first wife, Hunter's the only one still alive.
He's the only one left.
Yeah.
And he's the one that needs more help.
And he needs more help. And Hunter, his father knew that, he couldn't talk to him every day when he was doing all these crazy things without knowing that something was wrong. Mm-hmm. He's checking in on him because he cares about him. And now they're going to try to turn that into evidence of corruption or something.
Yeah.
But, Joe Klein goes right along with that.
Oh, he totally does. In fact, part of his article, and again, he does it again, where he says he would be outraged if the president asked Merrick Garland to slow walker limit this criminal inquiry. And then he's like, yeah, but it's all probably bullshit too, and the people investigating him are all full of shit, which basically comes off. I don't know if that's what he's trying to say, but what it comes off is that, this criminal inquiry inquiry into Hunter Biden is nonsense. It's not corrupted. The allegations are crap. But if they were real, I would be very, very angry. So I'm going to pretend they're real so I can do this thing. I don't know what he's talking about. It's like he's writing he's imagining things in his head that he thinks that he knows Hunter Biden didn't do, but he's still pretending he did it so he can get mad. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's like, who's got the head injury here? Who's got the head injury here? And by the way, he's not only saying that he pivots over here. So first he's like, Joe Biden shouldn't have any compassion for his kid, or if he does, nobody should see it, and da da da. But then he calls Hunter Biden's various depravities, I'm putting that in air quotes. He says that Hunter Biden's personal struggles are actually the public's business. I'm not sure how he makes that leap, because Hunter Biden isn't running for office. He's not a public official. And it's like Klein goes on and on like this. I'm not going to go through the article paragraph by paragraph because we'd all just shoot ourselves. But some of the lowlights are he suggests that Biden sequester troubled child Hunter. Sequester. That's one of his words. And it's like when Hunter's trying to make a deal over his tax and gun problems, right?
Yeah.
Right? He's trying to make up for what he did when he was addicted. He's trying to pay his restitution, do the right thing. The dude is in recovery.
Yeah. He's making amends.
He's making amends. That's what you're supposed to do when you're in recovery. And Klein here is like, no. Biden should tell Hunter, you're not welcome in the White House anymore. Get out of here. We don't need you. You're making me look bad. And it's like,
he literally says in the piece, why was he allowed to come to a state dinner?
Yeah.
He's supposed to be barred from the White House because he's making a plea deal to take responsibility for mistakes he made when he was an addict, when he was in active addiction. And instead of his father supporting his son in that, encouraging that, he is supposed to completely cut him off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, and like that word sequestering, like when I read that, my first question was like, is he suggesting Biden have Hunter committed? Maybe he should have, here's an idea, Mr. Klein. Why didn't you suggest that Biden give Hunter a lobotomy like the Kennedys did to Rose? Because she was troublesome, right? She was troublesome. Just cut out the brain, then he's fine, and problem solved, right, Joe Klein? I'm seriously, Marty, if one of Joe Klein's kids had an addiction problem and he's got 4, presumably happy children, do you think he'd turn his back on them? Or do you think
he'd snap his fingers and everything would be fixed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly what Joe Klein would do. Here's another doozy. Unconditional love is something every parent understands and aspires to. I mean, look, yes, but quite frankly, reading this, I don't think Joe Klein understands unconditional love at all.
He's got some work to do in that area.
Yeah, maybe. That line reminded me of a clip of Martha Stewart I saw years ago. She says so she's making lunch for kids. She's like, if you wrap your child's sandwich in a bow, you'll make them feel like you love them.
Oh,
and I as if, no, you don't really like them, but at least they'll think you do. And that's exactly the way Joe Klein. That's exactly the way Joe Klein sounds. Unconditional love is something every parent understands and aspires to. But when you have a shitty one, get rid of that one. Sequester them.
So, get thee to a monkery.
Exactly. So it's like, but either way, we've circled back to Joe Klein's baseline positions. Don't do anything Republicans could pounce on, and Democrats are weak. And apparently, having compassion for your kids is something Republicans can pounce on, and makes you weak. It makes you weak to love your kids.
Yeah,
yeah. I made the head injury joke about Klein, but I'm going to repeat it. After all this business about how Joe Biden should cut Hunter loose and abandon him, he turns on a dime. And then he closes by saying that the president, while abandoning his son and making him persona non grata, should also hold up Hunter as a bad example for America.
Oh.
And he says that Joe Biden, because Joe Biden has a child who has drug and mental health problems, well, that's reflective of a larger national crisis that Joe Biden could address from his personal experience.
Well, hey, that's true.
Well, yeah, but Klein wants it both ways. He wants to say that Hunter Biden's personal problems are the nation's problems. Joe Biden should turn his back on his son.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he should talk about the kid publicly.
Yeah.
Right.
As
you do. Hey, look at my useless kid, Joe Biden should say. You look at my useless drug addict kid, America. Don't be like him. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's the way you treat your kids.
Right. That's how you're supportive to your kid in recovery is you talk to the whole nation about all of the terrible things that he's done.
Yeah. I'm sure Joe Klein is winning Parent of the Year anytime soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the question then is like, why is the Washington Post doing this? Why are they publishing this?
Maybe they had some column spaces to fill. Maybe Kathleen Parker had a couple too many over the weekend.
Yeah, maybe, because who's clamoring for Joe Klein's opinion at this point? I mean, as we said, like he seemed to have disappeared off the radar. And then all of a sudden he comes back. He's on the editorial page of the Washington Post. And this is what he produces. And it's did they reach out to him and say, hey, Joe Klein, we really need someone to write this? Or did Joe Klein like mail it in and say, hey, I got this great idea for a piece? And they thought this was good? Because it doesn't have any useful information for the public or for Joe Biden or for anybody.
Yeah, like you said, like Joe Klein, where did you get this guy from? I mean, like George Will is 1,000,000 years old, but George Will has never gone away, right? He's just still plugging along.
Plus, he has this he's been at the Washington Post forever.
Yeah, exactly. Joe Klein, I mean, it's like Throwback Thursday.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's get this blast from the past. Why don't they, if the Washington Post did a comedy fest, they'd have Yakov Smirnoff headlining.
I love America.
In Washington Post editorial page, editorial write you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's one last thing I gotta say. This what it is to me reveals the complete bankruptcy of Joe Klein, the individual, the complete moral and mental degeneracy of this person. So after he's simultaneously said that Joe Biden should turn his back on his child, his troubled child with the history of addiction, while simultaneously holding up this person as an example of what not to do, pointing at his child like the scapegoat, he literally compares Hunter Biden to the Oklahoma City bombing and the Charleston, South Carolina church murders.
That's just a bridge too far.
It is. He says the issue of drug addiction is alive, electric, and very much with us. And he wants Joe Biden to talk about Hunter's problems with America in a negative way. Because it would be a chance to grieve and mourn and inspire, like Clinton after the Oklahoma City bombing or Barack Obama after the Charleston, South Carolina murders. I mean,
that's a terrible idea.
I mean, like whatever problems Hunter Biden has and whatever things Hunter Biden has done wrong, Hunter Biden has murdered precisely 0 people.
Right.
So he is not anywhere near comparable to the Oklahoma City bombing.
No.
Hunter Biden did not walk into a church and murder 9 people, driven by racism and hatred. I'm sorry.
I'm surprised he didn't throw in the Sandy Hook shooting while he was at it.
Yeah. And again, to bring this back to the Washington Post, what editor looked at this and said, yeah, this is fine. This is fine. Yeah. Publish this. Yeah. Go ahead, Joe. Great piece. Yeah, you left out a period by mistake. I mean, come on. Meanwhile, trying to say Joe Biden hasn't done anything about opioids. You were laughing about him not checking his facts on Jane Harmon when we first started this out. Well, guess what? He hasn't checked his facts on Biden either, because According to the January 2023 White House press release, overdoses and poisonings from opioids have gone down for 5 months in a row. He's increased interdiction efforts to keep them out of our country. Spent $50 million for local public health departments to get Narcan, the stuff the stop the overdose drug.
Yeah,
making it easier for programs to get the stuff and distribute it, trying to make Narcan over the counter, making sure there's treatment for addictions in prisons. And like this goes back to like 2021.
Yeah.
So he doesn't even know what he's talking about. He should build himself a guillotine and chop off his own stupid head, because he certainly isn't using his skull for anything more than a goddamn bread box and his involuntary muscle functions. I mean, if he did it right, he could still survive like Mike the Headless Chicken. They'd probably invite him on the goddamn Sunday talk shows anyway. Not like the gurgling noises made by Headless, but living Joe Klein would be different than anything else that comes out of his stupid mouth. Anyway.
Now, I think that's the kind of vituperation he disliked about the blogosphere so much, Brendan.
Yeah, well, fuck you, Joe Klein. I hope you don't like it anymore now.
It's just like old times. It's funny, though, because I also wanted to talk about something to do with the Washington Post. But it's not the editorial side. It's the reporting side.
What did they do this time?
Well, this is actually this is about Trump getting arrested for a third time this past week. Congratulations to him, by the way.
Golf clap.
Yeah, little applause for our disgraced ex-president. Yeah, it's an article written by Spencer Sue, Carol Lenig, and Tom Jackman. And it's all about the reasons why, if Trump is convicted, why he might not or should not go to prison.
I saw this. And my head almost exploded when I read this. I was just like, what?
I mean, the man none of his many trials have even begun, right? And we're already talking about how he shouldn't go to jail.
I know. Well, no, wait a minute. Pardon me. You mean the media is already talking about why he shouldn't go to jail?
Well, now we are too. That's how it works, Brendan. That's how it works.
I want to think that we're talking more about why he should go to jail, but
yeah, I think we will. I think we will, but in my mind, trying to carry out a coup in this country is pretty much the biggest crime I can think of, because
you think?
Yeah. I mean, it impacts everybody. First of all, I was thinking about it, and it's like, if I went down to my local bank branch and walked in there with a gun and give me all your money and rob the joint, the chances are pretty decent that most people in my hometown and most people in my home county wouldn't even know I did it, because, maybe they'd see it in the police blotter or something like that. Maybe word would get around.
Grocery store robbed.
Yeah, right. But it doesn't affect them that much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a serious crime. If I did that, it's a potentially very violent crime. You never know what's going to happen when you walk in someplace with a gun.
Yep.
But it's very serious, and it should carry a really strong penalty. But trying to steal an American election is way, way more serious in my mind. And so I know that the Washington Post wouldn't solicit an article about all the reasons, if I'm convicted of armed robbery, that I shouldn't or maybe shouldn't go to prison.
Yeah, nobody's going to be asking that question. You get caught, knocking over a liquor store, you got a gun, you're going to jail most likely. Nobody's going to be writing an article about but Marty was hungry.
Yeah.
He needed some money.
Yeah, there might be some people somewhere who are don't incarcerate anybody for any reason. But I think there's near unanimity that bank robbers should go to prison.
Well, honestly, dude, I saw I saw a little clip of little Ben Shapiro,
Yeah.
and he was saying he's like his argument for he was arguing why Trump's hoarding of documents at Mar-a-Lago wasn't a crime, and he was literally saying, yeah, Trump just sees things and he likes them, so he takes them. What's the big deal? He literally said that. And like people were responding with like people who like things and take them that they're not supposed to take. It's the definition of crime.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like
sometimes it's theft and sometimes it's rape, right?
Sometimes I mean they're literally defining crime down on the right. They're totally defining it down.
I love that. My defense is I wanted it.
Yeah, I know. So, mine. It doesn't work for a toddler. It shouldn't work for Donald Trump.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, like were you saying though, but like what Trump did and what he attempted in the US was huge. I mean, like you knock over the liquor store, two people are hurt. Yeah. One person is hurt. The guy that's working the liquor store. Right. Yeah. He's traumatized.
Maybe the customers are traumatized too.
If the customers are in there. But like Trump, I mean, like, my God, if he had even halfway gotten away with what he was trying to do on January 6th, you would have had riots in the streets. You would see cities in flames. I practically guarantee it. You would have police sent out to fight back against people rioting. There would be civic unrest all over the place. I mean, come on. It would affect everybody. Everybody.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, the first thing about this article is it's premature, right? I mean, like, can we please get to a trial and maybe a conviction before we start talking about how this guy shouldn't go to prison?
Yeah.
I mean, that's my first beef. Like, okay, if you're going to talk about it, we'll talk about it, right? And so the first thing is that back in 1965, and this was probably in reaction to the assassination of JFK, but Congress passed a law that gives former presidents lifetime Secret Service protection. And that means if Trump went to prison, he would be legally entitled to Secret Service protection. And I know that I think I was talking to you about this and you were kind of offended by this idea.
Oh, I'm totally offended by it. My main question is, why does he even deserve this protection? You have plenty of people that have done horrible crimes that don't get any protection at all in prison. Very famous people in prison. Mobsters.
Jeffrey Dahmer, people like that. But hey, that guy, the college coach who was molesting all his team members. Sandusky.
No, not Sandusky. The other guy.
Oh, the Olympics guy.
The Olympics guy. He just recently got shanked in prison.
Oh.
Jeffrey Epstein wound up on the end of a rope, no protection for any of those people. And like, I just don't understand why someone who, I'm going to assume he gets convicted for the sake of making the argument. I don't understand why a guy who's convicted of committing a coup, of trying to overturn an election and goes to jail for it, for incitement and insurrection, how does that person even get to keep the privileges of the presidency? Because in my world, you would take those privileges away and say, nah, dude, you don't get that anymore because of what you did. You don't get those privileges anymore at all. I mean, I just don't get it. It boggles my mind that we're even talking about why a criminal would get, a criminal and someone who committed a crime against his own country, a coup d'etat would somehow get protection. I just don't get it. I don't get it.
You'd think that you would surrender that, you'd surrender your presidential privileges, but here's the thing. Okay. So it's a law. It's on the books, right?
Yeah.
He gets this protection. There's only one way to get rid of it legally, and that's if Congress were to change the law. Mm-hmm. The chances that the Republicans will take away a Secret Service protection are zero.
Yep.
Okay. So is that a reason not to send him to jail because he would have to have Secret Service, palling around with him in there? And I don't see that, and so looking at the article, they went and talked to some unnamed, quote, former officials. And what they say is basically characterized in the article this way. Say, quote, sending Trump to prison could, quote, force politically and logistically complex questions over whether officials should detail agents to protect a former American president behind bars, leave it to the prison authorities to keep him safe, or secure him under some type of home confinement.
There's no way that guy should be allowed to fart around at Mar-a-Lago, which is a giant estate with an ankle bracelet. I'm sorry. That's just not it's not acceptable.
No.
Did you see that when I was researching this, and when we were researching this, we looked at it around the same time. Did you see that story about Peru's prison for ex-presidents? Did you see that?
Yeah, you sent me the link.
Yeah. Peru apparently has a prison for their ex-presidents because they have such a history of corruption in their political system. They've got 3 of them in there. One's in there for human rights abuses. The other one is basically a Peruvian Trump who tried to dissolve Congress and rule by fiat. And then another one's in there for money laundering. And they might have to build a new facility because they're running out of room.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know. We could use one of those. I mean, we should have built one and put Bush in there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then Trump could join him, you know. But no, that is an amazing story. The whole Peruvian thing where they have their specially built facility for corrupt ex-presidents. And it shows you, though, one thing it shows you is that it's not that unusual, or at least it's not unprecedented, to take bad presidents who commit crimes and hold them accountable.
Yeah. It's not impossible to put someone like Donald Trump in prison.
Yeah.
And if you want to protect him, what's wrong with solitary confinement? Didn't they do that to wasn't Chauvin? Derek Chauvin, the cop who killed George Floyd, didn't he get solitary for a good chunk?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing they did was they sent him to Minnesota prison, I guess, state prison, and they kept him in solitary to protect him.
Yeah, that's what I thought. He was in solitary most of the time. Now I know solitary,
and then
solitary is no joke, and it's not good for your health or your mental health or anything like that. But probably a little bit better than getting shanked in the shower.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what they did with Chauvin is after a while, they sent him to Arizona into the federal system under the theory that he would, number one, in Arizona, he wouldn't be housed with people he may have arrested, who might have a personal reason to go after him. And then secondly, that at least some federal prisons are housed, they're considered less violent criminals.
Yeah. That's my understanding as well.
Yeah. So they figured they could keep him safe in a federal prison in Arizona. And, Chauvin is one of the most notorious criminals in America.
Yep. Certainly right now.
Yeah. And you would think that there'd be a lot of people in prison who might want to do some harm to him. So if they feel like they can house him in a general population in a federal prison in Arizona, then you would think that they could figure out how to do that with Donald Trump. And especially if he's got a Secret Service contingent in there to protect him.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I can't believe we're even having this conversation.
No,
I simply cannot. I'm looking at the article now, and I see that former prosecutor, Chuck Rosenberg, who a frequent guest on MSNBC.
Yep.
He's saying that it's too impractical to send Trump to prison. That's surprising to me to begin with, because I've seen Chuck a number of times on the television, and he regularly unloads on Trump and his multiple crimes.
That's true.
Here he is saying that probation, fines, community service, and home confinement are all more attractive alternatives in prison.
Yeah.
I mean, what the fuck? Do they want him to put on a vest and go clear up the highway as punishment for January 6th? Because
completely.
I mean, police officers, people died. People died because of Donald Trump. Police officers got injured because of Donald Trump. Look, if you or I committed assault on a police officer, never mind battery, never mind getting an officer killed, but if you and I committed anything like that, we would be in jail. There would be no probation. There would be no community service and fines. We would be in jail behind bars.
Right.
And
It's a completely ridiculous thing to suggest. I mean, it reminds me of Joe Klein and his ilk, you know, going back to the battered wife syndrome, you know, afraid to stick up for themselves, always afraid of what the Republican talking points will be.
Yeah. And again, why is the Washington Post even publishing this stuff? Why are they even publishing it? And to be honest, later on in the article, they actually talked to someone from the service, from the Secret Service, former Secret Service agent, make my mouth work, saying that in some ways it would actually be easier to protect Trump in jail than on the outside, you know, because he can't travel around. They know where he is all the time. The perimeter is always secure. So why do they publish this whole thing being like, oh, why should we put him in jail? It might be difficult. Oh, the challenges around it, when they've already answered their own damn question.
Right. I mean, if it's easier to protect him in prison, then let's just do that.
Yes.
You know? I mean, but yeah, so they have this whole article, and the whole point is all the reasons why it would be like difficult or impractical to put the man in prison. And, you know, can we please just first have one of these juries find him guilty? You know, we got so far ahead of ourselves.
I mean, the horse is so far ahead of the cart right now. It's like, it's in a different state.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, the Washington Post is just outdoing itself.
Oh my God. It's constant. What do we used to call it back then? Back when we used to be blogging all the time back in the 2000s, concern trolling. Oh, I'm so concerned. We're so concerned. And you know what comes next, right?
What's that?
It's the Washington Post is going to do a big article on all the reasons that Biden has to pardon Trump. Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like all for the good of the country.
All for the good of the country, healing the nation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, right, folks, that's where we're at right now in the United States. Advice from pundits and journalists that we have to be timid in the face of GOP temper tantrums. Make sure that we give the GOP what they want. When it comes to Hunter Biden, we got to make sure that he is punished publicly
and shunned.
When it comes to Donald Trump, we got to figure out a way to make sure he doesn't go to jail even before he's convicted.
Yeah.
We have the Washington Post.
Pick up some garbage.
He could pick up some garbage along the highway. He could pay a parking ticket, just like I did a couple weeks ago.
Sure.
We have the Washington Post jumping into the fray, backing up both these positions. Give the GOP what they want. Give them what they want. Give them what they want.
They might hit you.
They might hit you. And at the end of the day, we're still here waiting for Trump to be held accountable.
Yeah.
Yep. We haven't even gotten to the accountability part yet, and the Washington Post is trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah. So just an example of being focused on the wrong things, you know, not really having a clear picture on what's important. I think that's really what it sums up our show today is the Washington Post dropping the ball and putting out some really substandard crap. And, you know, it used to be a lot more common there. So I don't want to act like they do this all the time. And that's almost the reason to point it out, I think.
Oh, yeah, that is a reason to point it out. I document the atrocities, but give credit for good behavior.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for our show today, right, Brendan?
Yep. That's our podcast for the week. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Brendan Squire and Marty Longman coming at you. Our intro and outro music is provided by the magnificent Royal Hounds from Nashville, Tennessee. They have a new independently released album out called Whole Lotta Nothing. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, and the music platform of your choice. So we'll catch you next time on the Progress Pondcast.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, folks.
Thanks a lot. We'll see you online. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.